My name is Bruce Penson. I'm Managing Director of ProDrive, and today we're here to speak about how to respond to cybersecurity incidents. So to put some context to why we do these webinars, lots of firms spend huge amounts of money on cybersecurity software, all sorts of fancy systems, and that's great. It might provide a bit of extra protection, maybe a lot of extra protection, but actually, one of the things that's going to de-risk your business the most against a cyber attack is knowing how to respond if an attack happens. So this webinar is a guide to getting started with putting together one of these plans, which we call a cyber security incident response plan. So hopefully everyone can see that. Okay. So let's just talk about why having one of these plans is so important. So as I'm sure you know, cybersecurity incidents are increasing in frequency. You can see lots of stuff in the news, just a few examples there on the slide. But the thing really now is you have to accept that everyone is a target. It's not just large organizations or organizations that might on the face of things seem more appealing to cyber criminals. Every single organization is a target for this stuff. And you know, another example of why this is expanding to be really, really serious to all businesses is we're actually seeing some of these what we call nation state attacks. So these very cleverly crafted cyber attacks that come from sort of rogue states. Some of these attacks are actually affecting, SME businesses now. So you've got to start with the viewpoint, really, that a cyber attack will at some point happen to you. It's not an if, it's a will now. And if you somehow think you're immune to this, it could put the very existence of your firm at risk. So once you've decided that, yes, our organization is going to get attacked at some point, we don't know when, then having a plan as to how to react when that happens becomes really, really important. So some other good reasons why you need a plan. The most important thing on here, I can't stress this enough, that when a cyber attack happens, people are going to panic. Then, it's a really unpleasant time. People will panic, they won't know what to do, and they might not do the right things or do anything. And time really is of the essence when a cyber attack happens, and those actions you take early on will have a massive, massive impact on the outcome of the attack. So having a plan will limit the damage from the attack, may not stop it all, but it can certainly limit it. And also having a plan allows you to communicate clearly to everyone what their tasks are. When you have something written down, it's much easier to respond under pressure than trying to think of things on the fly. Equally, by reacting quickly, you can take factors to mitigate the attack quickly, which will limit the damage again. By knowing what you're going to do beforehand, you can take those actions quicker. So from a governance perspective, lots of cyber insurers now are asking for a response plan. They're saying that's mandatory if you want to get an insurance policy with them. There's also some security accreditations that state that you need one should you have those. The Information Commissioner's Office also says you should have a incident response plan. That's specifically around personal data. But if you don't have one, then effectively you're in breach of the data privacy GDPR regulations. But I think, the bottom line is if you don't have a plan, it's going to cost you at some point. And it doesn't cost much to make one. In fact, it's just an investment of a few hours of your time. So we'll talk about how to do that in a second. So we're going to break down writing the plan into 5 separate steps. And the first one is to understand the scope of what your plan covers. So essentially, you need to be clear what you consider a cybersecurity incident to be. It's probably going to be quite similar for most organizations, but note, I've put some examples here on the screen, you should note that it doesn't necessarily mean that you've had an attack from external source. It could be a rogue employee, could be simply that you've given unauthorized access or accidental access to someone to data which they should not be seeing. So that's the first point, because these items that you put in the scope, when one of these things happen, this is when you put your plan into action. So the next step is you need to define what the kind of initial actions are, and this is what all your staff should be trained on doing should they suspect that a cyber incident is happening. And as I said earlier, these initial actions are really, really important in determining what the outcome of the incident is. As I said earlier as well, remember that the person who is suffering this, if you're sitting behind a computer and you start seeing something on the screen that's going on and you think it's a cyber criminal on your computer, you're probably going to be panicking. So to have a clear list at hand, somewhere easy to find of what to do, is really going to help in that instance. And really, this should be kept with everyone, either in a laptop bag, or you should have some pinned to the walls around the computers, that kind of thing, where they're easily accessible. And you also need a way for people to report this. So this can be, a Word form or something, but you probably want a copy of the reporting procedure outside of the computer system as well, because if you have a cyber attack, it's possible that it might not be accessible. So printed version is very useful. Typically, the kind of information I've put on the screen there is what you want to be collecting. If you have an outsourced IT company or internal IT department, you're probably going to want to pass this information on to them pretty quickly. So you then need to define your incident management process. So what happens after the incident is reported. So normally you would expect to put a team of people together. The team would vary in size depending on the size of your organization, and those people would work together to manage the incident. So you need to make sure you've got your process for this documented, and who's going to be in that team. And you probably want some deputies as well, because people may not be there on holiday or sick or meetings or whatever it might be. And it's the responsibility of these people to coordinate everything that's going on. That's collecting all the information from the various sources to communicate out to people. So you're going to be wanting to communicate to potentially your clients, definitely your staff. There'll be other parties involved as well, which we'll cover in a minute. And you need to respond to questions too. If you've got a major cyber incident, you might have your insurers involved. They'll probably appoint some legal representatives for you. You'll have a forensic team. These people will be firing questions at you left, right, and centre. You need to be able to respond to them quickly. So people will need those responsibilities. And you need to document everything as well, because at the end of this process, there's a few things. Firstly, you might need that information documented for insurance purposes, or if there's any kind of legal fallout from it. But also you'll want to review it to learn what you could have done better and potentially improve your plan as well. And you'll want to have regular meetings of this team. So define how you're going to do that. Is that something you do, on WhatsApp, for instance, because people are working remotely, or is it something that you do in person in a room? So all that kind of information needs to be in this process. So the final part, and this is really important, is to have your contact matrix documented. So these are people that you're going to be needing to speak to throughout the course of your incident. So I've put a couple of examples on there. By the way, these slides will be sent around after the webinar, so you don't feel you need to write this down or take screenshots or anything. But the types of party you're going to need. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, your IT people, whether that's an internal team or external. Information Commissioner's Office is pretty likely to need to be involved if there's any kind of personal data that's involved in the breach that you've had, and any kind of system-wide breach is likely to involve that. But other contacts that you're probably going to need are police, your insurance company, clients, Now, you might think, well, do I really want to tell my clients that I've had a cyber breach? Well, consider the other alternative is that a criminal gets your client's details and maybe some information that you wouldn't want to be public from your system. And the first thing that your clients hear is this criminal contacting them, asking them for a ransom not to release the information. So much better it comes from you. And equally, then you can show that you're in control of the situation as well. Other people you might consider investors, marketing and comms, because you might need your comms people involved in handling this and making sure that communication is appropriate. Your legal team or external legal counsel or anyone your insurers might provide for you, these kind of people. So I can't stress enough that the onus is really on you, and this is one of the reasons why you have this plan, to make sure you're communicating with these people regularly, because they're all really important stakeholders in the incident, and the outcome of it will depend on how well they can act, which means that they have to have good information to act on. So I'm just going to finish up. We've done a pretty quick run through there. We've got some resources on here. I should say, by the way, that if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat and I'll run through them just after this slide. So some resources that are really useful. Again, these links will be on the slides that go around afterwards. So the National Cybersecurity Centre, so that's the government's cybersecurity organisation, and they've got some really good guides, quite detailed guides on incident management on their website. It might be overkill for an SME business, but if you want a reference point, please go for that. ProDrive have actually produced a little kind of how-to data sheet as well, which we'll send around with the follow-up from the webinar. It's basically what I've been talking about today, but written down. And another really good resource is something called IASME. Well, it's now called IASME Cyber Assurance. The name has changed. So some of you attending this webinar, you may have heard of Cyber Essentials, which is a government cybersecurity standard. That's about how to configure the technical stuff in your system. IASME Cyber Assurance is also a standard, but it runs alongside Cyber Essentials. But it's all about having the right policies and procedures and having those done to recommended standards. So if you were to go through that process, having a cybersecurity incident response plan to best practice standards is part of it. It includes lots of other useful things as well, like business continuity planning, cybersecurity policies. So well worth looking at. If you go to the IASME website, you can see all the kind of the assessment points and question sets on there as well. And I should add also that if you want any more information on that, please feel free to get in touch with ProDrive. We're a certification body for it as well, so we can provide a bit more background to it. So with that, I'll go on to questions. Is it really likely that a small firm could suffer a cyber attack? Isn't it mainly large businesses? So yeah, so this is something obviously I referred to earlier, but essentially anyone is a target these days. And I think we have to get away from the mentality that a cyber attack happens to someone else. It will almost certainly, I'd say now, happen to everyone at some point. It's really, really very difficult to avoid. So being prepared is the best course of action. And as I just say, I'd just point you to all the various news articles. These are large companies. Yes, they're bigger targets, but they spend millions and millions of pounds on cybersecurity. SMEs don't have the luxury of that kind of security budget. So therefore, it's much easier for a criminal to attack an SME. And hence, that's why they're attractive targets. And the other question we've got is, what if I don't have time to put a plan together? So I would say for a typical SME business, you're probably looking at about 3 to 4 hours of your time to get a reasonable plan in place. Certainly one that will make a very big difference if you do have a cyber attack. So hopefully everyone considers that to be a reasonable investment of time in something that could potentially save your business. I certainly would. The great thing about having one of these plans is it doesn't cost you anything to do other than a bit of time, and it's not a huge amount of time either. Yet it's a massive reduction in the risk to your business. So if you're spending any kind of money on cybersecurity, you should be doing this first, in my personal opinion. Right. I think that's it. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. So we'll wrap that up for today. As I say, there will be an email coming around afterwards with some follow-up on this, copy of the slides, the how-to guide. If you do have any further questions or interested in any of the standards, Cyber Essentials or IASME Cyber Assurance I mentioned, please do reply and let us know and we'll get in touch. And with that, I wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you very much.